There was a bunch of bad fights. There was a bunch of bad decisions. It wasn't just one.
Oh, wow.
Oh, that's insane.
Oh,
Really? That's
my
insane.
God.
He got
Really?
robbed. He got fucking robbed.
It was bad decisions. Just almost like people who don't know what they're seeing.
But the reality is, who gives a shit? We're not judges.
Sean O'Malley, he won the fight, but did Sean O'Malley win the fight?
Can't run the last 2 rounds and take the title away from the champion. So you have people that think a lot of different ways on how they score a fight.
I watched Khabib's reaction to Petr Yan losing the fight, and he could not believe that it was even a split decision.
Yeah, I'm blown away that George St. Pierre won that fight.
Feel disrespected, you know. One of the judges had it 49-46. Like, who are you? I might want to have a word with you.
When it comes to the UFC, we expect to see the best fighters in the world step inside the octagon and settle things the honest way with their fists, their grappling, and their heart. But sometimes, the outcome of a fight doesn't come down to the fighters at all. It comes down to the judges sitting cage side, and that's where things get messy. MMA uses what's called the 10-point must system, where judges score rounds based on effective striking, grappling, aggression, and octagon control. Sounds straightforward, right? Well, in practice, it is anything but. Judges have different perspectives, limited angles, and sometimes their decisions leave the entire world scratching their heads. Over the years, we've seen some of the most controversial scorecards in UFC history. Fights where the majority of fans, fighters, and media believed one man won, but the judges saw it differently. These aren't just ordinary decisions. These are the kinds of calls that spark outrage, endless debates, and in some cases, even change the course of fighters' careers forever. So today, we're counting down the top 7 most controversial losses and decisions in UFC history. And trust me, some of these fights still make fans angry to this day. 7. Diego Sanchez versus Ross Pearson, UFC Fight Night 42-2014. If you've been watching the UFC for a while, you know Diego Sanchez was always a fan favorite. Wild brawls, insane toughness, and a willingness to eat shots just to land one of his own. That's what made him a legend. But against Ross Pearson in 2014, none of that should have mattered, because this fight wasn't even close. For 3 rounds, Pearson picked Diego apart with clean, accurate striking. Pearson landed the sharper shots, controlled the pace, and stayed disciplined while Diego was swinging at air more often than not. The commentary team had Pearson winning clearly. Fans watching at home thought the same thing. Media scorecards, almost all in Pearson's favor. Then came the shocker. When Bruce Buffer read the decision, split decision for Diego Sanchez, the arena erupted in boos. Pearson stood there in disbelief, shaking his head, while Sanchez celebrated a win he didn't truly earn. This wasn't just a bad call. It was one of the worst robberies fans had seen in years. Dana White himself was so embarrassed by the judging that he paid Ross Pearson his win bonus anyway, admitting Pearson was the rightful victor. To this day, this fight is remembered as one of the clearest examples of why fans and fighters lose trust in the scoring system. Number 6. Sean O'Malley versus Petr Yan, UFC 280-2022. When this fight was booked, many fans believed Sean O'Malley was being thrown into the fire. Petr Yan, the former bantamweight champion, was known for his crisp boxing, pressure, and toughness. O'Malley, on the other hand, was the flashy striker with big hype behind him, but untested at the elite level. What followed was a 3-round war that shocked the MMA world. O'Malley had his moments with sharp counters, knees, and striking volume, while Yan scored takedowns and landed heavy punches that had Sean visibly hurt. Many fans and analysts watching thought Yan's control and damage gave him the edge. In fact, most major MMA media outlets scored the fight for Yan. But when the judges read the scorecards, split decision, Sean O'Malley, the arena erupted. Half the crowd cheered, half booed, and Yan walked out shaking his head in disbelief. This wasn't just about one fight. The decision was controversial because it catapulted O'Malley into title contention, while Yan's career momentum took a major hit. For many fans, this became a symbol of the UFC pushing a star forward, whether or not the judge's decision truly reflected what happened inside the cage. To this day, debates rage online. Did O'Malley do enough with damage and striking to win? Or did Jan's control and big shots make him the rightful winner? One thing's for sure, this decision remains one of the most hotly debated in UFC history. Number 5. Frankie Edgar vs. Benson Henderson 2, UFC 150 2012. Frankie Edgar is no stranger to razor-close fights, and his rematch with Benson Henderson might be one of the most controversial decisions of his career. Their first fight at UFC 144 was already debated, with Henderson winning a unanimous decision to take Edgar's lightweight belt. But when the UFC booked the rematch just months later, many fans believed Frankie would finally get his justice. The second fight was incredibly close from start to finish. Edgar landed crisp boxing combinations, mixed in takedowns, and seemed to adjust much better than in their first meeting. Henderson, on the other hand, relied on leg kicks, pressure, and his size advantage to make every round competitive. When the final bell rang, most watching thought Edgar had done just enough to reclaim his belt. Even UFC President Dana White admitted he scored the fight for Edgar. Yet, when the judges' scorecards were read, Benson Henderson retained his title via split decision. The arena erupted in boos, Edgar looked crushed, and fans worldwide felt they had just witnessed a robbery. This decision not only cost Edgar his chance to immediately regain the belt, but also pushed him to move down to featherweight, effectively ending his legendary lightweight run. To this day, UFC 150 remains one of the biggest examples of how razor-thin fights can define careers. If the judges had leaned the other way, Edgar's legacy at lightweight might have been even greater. Number 4. Michael Bisping vs. Matt Hamill, UFC 75 2007. Before he was the middleweight champion and UFC Hall of Famer, Michael Bisping was at the center of one of the most debated decisions in UFC history. UFC 75 in London saw Bisping, the hometown favorite, take on Matt Hamill, a former Ultimate Fighter castmate with elite wrestling and raw power. From the opening bell, Hamill shocked everyone by taking the fight to Bisping. He landed heavy strikes, controlled the clinch, and repeatedly took Bisping down. For much of the fight, it looked like Hamill was not only winning but dominating. The crowd was stunned. This wasn't the script they expected for their British hero. When the final horn sounded, most people, analysts, fans, even some of Bisping's supporters, thought Hamill had done enough to earn a clear decision victory. But then came the judges' scorecards. Michael Bisping was declared the winner via split decision. The O2 Arena erupted, but across the MMA world, outrage followed. Dana White himself admitted that Hamill had been robbed, and this fight is still brought up whenever fans discuss bad judging. For Hamill, it was a heartbreaking loss that derailed his momentum. For Bisping, it allowed him to move forward in his career, but the controversy stuck with him for years. Looking back, this fight remains a perfect example of how home crowd energy and poor judging can completely alter the outcome of a fighter's career. Number 3. Lyoto Machida vs. Shogun Rua-Wang, UFC 104 2009. At UFC 104, Lyoto Machida was riding one of the most hyped waves in MMA history. He was the Dragon, the undefeated karate master who had just captured the light heavyweight belt by knocking out Rashad Evans. Fans and analysts were calling it the Machida era, a new age where nobody could figure out his elusive style. Enter Mauricio Shogun Rua. The former PRIDE superstar had struggled in his early UFC fights, but against Machida, he came in with the perfect game plan: relentless leg kicks, body shots, and constant forward pressure. For 5 rounds, Shogun chopped away at Machida's legs and body, slowing him down and landing the cleaner, more damaging strikes. By the end of the fight, most fans, commentators, and even fighters watching at home believed Rua had done enough to dethrone the champion. Joe Rogan himself said live on commentary that it looked like Shogun had clearly won. But then the shocker. All 3 judges scored the fight for Machida. The decision was unanimous, and the crowd erupted in boos. Shogun looked crushed, Machida relieved, and the MMA world exploded in controversy. The backlash was so strong that the UFC immediately booked a rematch. And in that rematch, Shogun left no doubts, knocking Machida out cold in the first round to claim the belt and erase the sting of that robbery. To this day, Machida versus Shogun Y is remembered as one of the worst decisions in UFC history, and proof that sometimes the judges just don't see the same fight everyone else does. Number 2. Georges St. Pierre versus Johnny Hendricks, UFC 167, 2013. Georges St. Pierre is widely considered the greatest welterweight of all time. By UFC 167, he was the reigning champion, riding a legendary win streak and dominating everyone put in front of him. But when he stepped into the octagon against Johnny Hendricks, fans expected a war, and that's exactly what they got. From the opening bell, Hendricks brought the fight to GSP like few had ever done. His left hand, one of the most feared weapons in mixed martial arts, landed again and again, rocking St. Pierre multiple times. Hendricks mixed in takedowns, controlled the pace, and looked like he was bullying the champion. By the end of the 5 rounds, GSP's face was battered and swollen, while Hendricks looked relatively fresh. Most fans, media members, and even Dana White himself thought Hendricks had won clearly. Media scorecards overwhelmingly gave the fight to Hendricks, many by 3 or even 4 rounds to 1. But when Bruce Buffer read the decision, the judges awarded a split decision to Georges St. Pierre. The arena erupted in boos. Dana White blasted the Nevada State Athletic Commission in the post-fight press conference, calling the decision atrocious. Hendricks felt robbed of his chance to become champion, while GSP, visibly exhausted and emotional, announced he was stepping away from the sport. To this day, GSP versus Hendricks is remembered as one of the most controversial decisions in UFC history. Many argue Hendricks was the true uncrowned champion that night, but officially the belt stayed with St. Pierre, adding yet another layer of mystique to his legendary career. 1. Jon Jones versus Dominic Reyes, UFC 247, 2020. Jon Jones is widely regarded as the greatest fighter to ever step into the octagon. By 2020, he had already cemented his legacy, defending the light heavyweight title multiple times against killers like Daniel Cormier, Alexander Gustafsson, and Glover Teixeira. But when he faced Dominic Reyes at UFC 247, the world saw a fight that many still believe Jones lost. From the opening round, Reyes came out sharp. His boxing was crisp, his movement fluid, and he pressured Jones in a way few had ever dared. Reyes landed heavy combinations, dropped Jones to a knee with body shots, and controlled the pace through the first 3 rounds. Heading into the championship rounds, most fans and analysts had Reyes up on the scorecards, 3 rounds to none, or at the very least 2-1. But in the 4th and 5th rounds, Jones showed why he is a champion. He turned up the pressure, walked Reyes down, and controlled the cage. Still, the question remained, was it enough to erase Reyes' early dominance? When the final horn sounded, fans were on the edge of their seats, waiting for the announcement. Then came the shocker. All 3 judges scored the fight for Jon Jones unanimously. The arena erupted in disbelief. The commentary team was stunned. Media outlets across the board overwhelmingly scored the fight for Reyes, with 14 out of 21 major outlets giving him the win. Even years later, fans debate whether Reyes truly beat Jones that night. For Reyes, it was the fight of his life. For Jones, it was the narrowest escape of his career. And for fans, it stands as one of the most controversial decisions in UFC history, maybe the most controversial. So there you have it, the top most controversial losses and decisions in UFC history. From Frankie Edgar and Benson Henderson, to Sean O'Malley and Petr Yan, all the way up to Jon Jones versus Dominic Reyes. These fights remind us that in mixed martial arts, sometimes it's not about who fights better, but how the judges see the fight. And here's the real kicker. These decisions don't just affect the fighters' records. They change legacies. They shape title pictures, Hall of Fame resumes, and even careers that might have gone very differently with the right call on the scorecards. But now it's your turn. Which fight do you think was the worst robbery in UFC history? Drop your pick in the comments. And hey, if you haven't already, check out my last video where we broke down why some fighters never recover after a brutal knockout loss. Trust me, it is a deep dive you do not want to miss. Until next time, keep your hands up, protect your chin, and I'll see you in the next one.